You can start.
Great. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our outreach presentation. We're Team 14575 Capital Bots. We're from Herndon, Virginia, and this year we're going to be starting our third FTC season. So today we're going to talk you guys through the introduction to FTC and strategies for success. So here are a few ways that we have benefited from FTC through our 2 seasons of experience. So everyone has different roles on the team. And basically, depending on the role you have, you can develop all of these skills throughout the season. So if you're a builder, you'll probably develop skills of designing, prototyping, making 3D CAD designs online, building, like the hardcore mechanical aspect. And then programmers will obviously learn a lot more about Java programming. And then there's a large part of FTC that's dedicated to outreach, like what we're doing today, and fundraising, advertising for your team. And it's in an effort to basically connect the outside world and the other youth communities to STEM and to FTC. And then, of course, teamwork and collaboration, which is what FTC is all about. And yeah. So what is FTC in its like literal meaning? So FTC is a robotics competition. It stands for First Tech Challenge, and first meaning it's part of the organization called First. And First, basically, it spreads STEM to youth communities through 4 different challenges that it has, or like 4 different competitions or contests. So this would be the 3rd highest one, and it's with an age gap, so it depends on the age. It's not in like a higher ranking. But yeah, FTC is a little bit harder than the FLL and junior FLL, which come below it. It's a little bit more advanced. So every year a new FTC challenge is released. Last year it was Skystone. The year before that was Rover Ruckus. So it has some theme to it. And basically you have to build a robot and program it to complete these different tasks on your game field and to score points. And depending on how well you do with your robot and the other aspects that we'll talk about, you can advance to a next level or win awards. So the main parts of FTC are going to be, first of all, the robot competition. So building the robot and programming it. Then the design presentation, which includes the actual presentation that you have to the judges where you present your robot, whatever makes your team unique. You want to present your notebook, your outreach, your fundraising, everything you want to present to the judges. So you want to talk about your team, your robot, in like a short explanation. And then the judges will also ask you questions during that design presentation. So you have to know everything about your robot and what your team has done, what the best parts of your team are, and how you guys work with problem solving. And then also the judges will probably come up to you and observe your team behavior and your robot behavior during the competition. So that's all like under that design category. And then there's the engineering notebook, which I said you would turn in during the design presentation. So the engineering notebook is like a journal of everything that you've done throughout the season. It's like a documentation. So basically all of your robot from stage 1 to your final stage, you want like all of these pictures in the notebook, all of these sketches, every single meeting. What did you guys do? What are the tasks? What did you figure out? Did you have like an online meeting? A lot of people do that too. So you want to document that too. You want to document outreach. You want to document fundraising, and everything you do from the start of the season to the end, even preseason, which is the time where a lot of people learn new skills like programming to apply then during the season. They do during that time, so it doesn't take away part of the season time before the competition. You want to document everything. So the robot competition is the central part. It's not necessarily the most important in that aspect, but it's like kind of what everything is about. So all the other aspects are surrounded around the robot competition. So basically, your team will build and program a robot. It will compete in 5 different matches with alliances. So you and your robot and another team's robot are allied together against another alliance, and your scores are kept together. It's not any separate team score. because it's a lot about teamwork and like helping other teams in FTC. And then basically, depending on how well you do and how many points you score, how many matches you win, you move up in ranking. And then whoever is the highest for ranked teams will choose other teams to do finalist, semifinalist, and then finally finish the winning alliance match. And then your robot competition is heavily considered into the awards you win. So then the design presentation in a little bit more depth would be basically you're explaining your robot to the judges and your team to the judges. So it would be all the details of your robot, your journey throughout the year, which is like the detailed documentation in the notebook, which you would turn in here. But you don't have to give all of those details because your notebook is going to be really thick, filled with writing and sketches. You don't have to explain all of that. But the highlights of your season, what you want the judges to know about your team in specific, especially your outreach, sponsorships, and fundraising. This is telling the judges that your team really knows how to expand on FTC, which is FTC is all about gracious professionalism. So how do you guys spread STEM and stuff like that? And then, of course, what makes your robot unique? How are you guys completing tasks on the field? And how is your design unique or different from other people's design, but you still get specific tasks done? So you're going to be presenting your robot and your team for 5 minutes, and then the judges are going to ask you questions for like another 4 or 5 minutes. So you want to know everything about your robot and your team and everything that you've done throughout the season. So this is like an example of how important it is to plan an FTC for basically every task that you do. This is a very simple task. It's not required. It's low commitment, but it's something that we still plan for because we try to plan for everything. It's really important to do this because if you don't plan, a lot of times the execution will go badly and then you're going to wonder, where did I go wrong? So a plan tells you everything. The execution tells you more. And then you can see in the plan, okay, this is what happened. So this is just a simple plan of our trifold. We use a trifold just to allow other teams to see like a few things about what we've done behind the scenes. We take it to the judging presentation. Sometimes when teams are not at their booths, other people can come and look up at this presentation and see how the team is going. You might want to put awards at your booths and stuff like that. So this is just a small minor thing, but we still want to emphasize planning as one of the biggest parts of FTC. So what is the engineering notebook? So I talked about it a bit before, but basically this is an example of our engineering notebook. It literally is a notebook. And basically you're talking about your building, your robot, your programming, your outreach, everything in this notebook. And you're talking about it in like a date sequential order. So you're going to have a recap of each meeting. You're going to have design CAD pictures printed out, a bunch of pictures of people working in the meeting, different mechanisms, a lot of stuff, and then also sketches. Everything doesn't have to be typed. A lot of things, some people have notebooks that aren't typed at all, which is totally fine. It depends on how your team wants to go, but most people prefer typing. It's just easier. But you can have sketches, drawings, a lot of team pictures. Again, you want to show you're collaborating, you're engaged, you know what you're doing, you're trying your best. And again, I want to emphasize pictures, a lot of pictures, and have text corresponding with pictures, have diagrams. That's really important to show that you're like, okay, how do we, plan everything out? Goals, budgeting. A lot of people think that budgeting is a responsibility of coaches, but that's not true at all. The team needs to be involved in the budget. They need to know what parts are we ordering for building. So basically everything that you talk about, every meeting that you have, every discussion that you have, you want to record everything in the notebook, and you want it to be like somewhat organized in the notebook. There can be a few spelling errors and the judges won't really care, but you want it to be organized and you want your notebook to stand out. So don't make it like the same boring notebook format. Those are just some of the highlights of the note in depth that you can read about online off of the FTC website. But one of the more important things is that, first of all, everyone should be writing in the notebook. The judges know when not everyone has written, and when one or two people have written the whole notebook for the team, it's very evident. And if you guys make mistakes as part of your design or robot process or your engineering process, if you're making mistakes or you've had some failures and some successes, highlight everything, because no team is going to be perfect and finish everything before the competition perfectly and do everything in order and not have any failures. So you want to show that you are having failures, and you want to write all of this down. And a lot of times the notebook is actually a reference for the team to look at in case they forget how something went or forget some parts that they ordered. The notebook is a good way to document for the team, not just to show the judges how the team is. So put a lot of importance into the notebook. And since I emphasize pictures a lot, these are like examples of things to add apart from the writing aspect. So these are pictures of our team collaborating, our mechanisms in real life. Then we have some CAD. CAD is a way to kind of plan out what it's going to look like before you build it, so you don't waste more time in building. But this is examples of things we've drawn online versus in paper. Anything, even if it looks messy, just put it in there, whatever you've used. And CAD is also really important. So these are just some pictures that you should add.
As we talked about earlier, there are various awards you can win at the FTC competition in addition to the Robot Game Awards. The best award you can win is the Inspire Award, and this is an award that is given to the team that represented the entire first challenge. They're the team was that had like they were topping every other team in every category, which includes robot game, design presentation, engineering notebook, etc. After the Inspire Award is the Think Award. So the Think Award is given to the team that best reflects the journey that they took through their entire design process. So whoever has the best engineering notebook, which describes their best journey throughout the season, that's who wins the Think Award. After the Think Award is the Connect Award, and the Connect Award is given to the team who had the most outreach and who had the most countable, like whose outreach counted the most. So whoever connected with their local community and spread the principles of FIRST throughout it, they are the people who generally win the Connect Award. After the Connect Award is the Rockwell Collins Innovate Award. And the Rockwell Collins Innovate Award is basically the award that awards the most innovative part of your robot, whichever team thunk outside the box. After the Innovate Award is the Design Award, and this is for whichever team had the best robot design. After the Design Award is a Motivate Award, and this is the award that is given to the team who who has the best um who's like the most cheerful team at the competition, the team that helps other teams a lot. So these are usually the people who win the Motivate Award. And then after the Motivate Award is the Control Award, and this is given to the team with the best programs. What is outreach? So aside from the three main components of FTC, outreach is something that's necessary for a successful FTC team. There are many different ways you can get outreach, which some examples are conducting workshops, having school science fairs, creating presentations, uh, going to fundraisers. Many successful teams accumulate hundreds and hundreds of hours of outreach. And if you want your outreach to be counted, make sure you log it precisely in your engineering notebook and log how many hours of outreach you did and what you were doing in the place you were doing outreach. So these are some examples of us doing outreach. On the left is us at the Haycock Science Fair, and there we were explaining to children between the grades of 1 and 6 about FTC and 3D printing. At the top right is our fundraiser at Mod Pizza, and on the right is our FTC session in a library. So how to join FTC? One of the best ways to get into FTC is to create a team. However, there are many obstacles in the way of creating a team, such as resources, team members, coach participation, and team member participation. If you want to create a team, you can email us at capitalbotsinc@gmail.com and we'll help you create a team if there are other people who request in your area. But the best way to get into FTC is to join an existing team. in order to join a team, you can go to the first website and then you can put in your zip code and it'll give you a list of teams near you and you can email them and ask them if they have any open slots available. How to manage all these tasks. So there are many different tasks in FTC, like outreach, fundraising, building the robot, programming, getting your play field, and more. But to organize them, what we did last year is we created this thing called a Kanban board, and we organized the amount of time we would have in each part of building a robot and creating the design presentation. Some some things that are required in order to kickstart an FTC team would be 8 or more members, so your team members aren't overwhelmed. And keep in mind that these are they're not requirements; they're more of just recommendations so that you'll have a better season. After having 8 or more members, you should have $4,000 in funds. Not really necessary if you CAD your entire robot, but if you don't, this is so you can get some spare parts and then make sure you can put in time and hard work. Without time and commitment, there's really no point in doing FTC. So there are many different roles in an FTC team, such as building, programming, etc. In order to organize your roles, a good way would be to give each person a major role and 1 or 2 minor roles. So this way, whenever a person's at a team meeting, they're not wandering around aimlessly and they are providing and they're contributing to the overall progress of your team to the competition. Who are the builders? The builders are one role in FTC, and these are the people that build the robot. If you are a builder, you should be given a time limit because if you don't have a time limit, you're going to want to hold on to the robot as long as possible so you can make improvements and changes to the robot. And if you are the team member of a builder, you need to make sure they hand off the robot to the programmer and give the programmers enough time to program. Otherwise, you won't have a working robot at the competition. So these are some examples of us building. On the left is us working on some chassis, on one of our chassis and a robot. And on the right is our lifting mechanism for our Skystone competition. Who are the programmers? Programmers are responsible for programming the robot. In the competition, there are 2 different types of programming, autonomous and teleop. Autonomous is the first period of the robot competition, and in this time, the robot is expected to move according to instructions that were already programmed, and make it you can put a bunch of different statements inside your program to make it responsive to different scenarios. But overall, most of the code in autonomous is pre-programmed. After after the autonomous period is over, then is the teleop period. In this time, there are 2 drivers who are driving the robot, and they try to score as many points as possible within the time they have. So what does the person managing CAD do? Person managing CAD is responsible for designing ideas that the team had after the challenge is released. So these are the people who design potential parts for you to 3D print and create. And they're also the ones who can design your entire robot. If you can design your robot in CAD, it's recommended because you can make all the different changes you need in CAD without having much of a problem. It'll make your costs for the entire season drop a lot, and it can also make sure that your robot fits inside the guidelines without building and then realizing later, oh, the robot doesn't fit this or it's too big. So these are some examples of things that we have CAD'ed. On the left is us 3D printing one of our designs for last year's competition. And these are all designs that were used on our robot.
All right, so moving into a little bit more specific, I'm going to get into the basic building structure. So when you're first building your robot, builders will work in a sequence in which you're building your robot from bottom to top. So first you're going to want to design and build your chassis. So chassis design, is dependent on what the challenge is for that year. So what your chassis needs to achieve is it has to have wheels and motors so that it can move efficiently across the playing field fairly quickly and accurately, so it's not drifting or strafing when you don't want it to. So first, what you're gonna do is make your design for the chassis, and that's based on the competition. If the competition, like last year, had a part where you needed to fit under a 14-inch bridge, even though the dimensions are allowed up to 18 inches, you're going to want to have a lower to the ground chassis, for example, because you need to fit in a more compact way in terms of height. So after you've built and designed your chassis, you're going to work on systems. You can have anywhere from 2 to 6, and some teams have different teams have different amounts of systems on the robot. All systems are they refer to basically different parts of the robot that achieve different tasks. So using last year's competition as an example, you needed to intake a block into your robot. You needed to you need to grab the block. Then you needed to lift the block and stack it. So for this, you need at least 3 systems. First system would be 2 to 3 systems. What we did is we had an intake system, and the intake system would bring the block into our robot, and we'd have full control of it, so we can carry it across the playing field and pick it up wherever it was on the playing field. Then the next system would essentially grab the block, and it would release the block, so it was just a claw. Then the next was a lift mechanism. This lift mechanism allowed us to stack the blocks taller and taller. And in this lift mechanism, we had a smaller mechanism, which allowed us to move arm from the front to the back of the robot to basically transfer the block from inside the robot to outside the robot. So you can work on systems simultaneously, or you can be working on your systems one at a time. It really depends on time constraints. We recommend that you keep good communication and integration between your systems so that they work well. If you don't have this, things won't fit in the robot. They won't work together. You need to make sure everybody's on the same page, which is why team meetings are very important, because communication is very key in FTC. Next is build walls or some sort of protection around your robot. This is very necessary because in competition, robots collide, robots hit walls, things can break. So having protection around your robot will allow for basically things to be are less prone to breaking, and it'll make your competition day a lot easier. Next, which is a lot of people don't realize how important it is wire management. Wire management is very important because, first of all, having compact, clean wire management that's not showing makes other teams look at your robot and go, wow, that's a really nice looking robot. Um, Next is wire management also helps you access parts of your robot so there's not a bunch of wires everywhere, especially if you have moving parts, gears, wheels, motors, servos, all these kind of things that are moving. If a wire gets caught and gets severed, you won't be able to use that servo, and you'll have to frantically replace it in between your matches. So having good wire management can save you a lot of time. Next is the basic programming structure. So there are 2 different types of FTC programming available. Both of them have their pros and cons. So first is Java programming, which uses Android Studio. Android Studio is the software for Java programming. What's great about Android Studio is it is complex and it has multiple functions and methods you can use in your program. So there's a really wide variety of what you can do. Um, Whereas you can also still have simple and advanced programs in Android Studio. Block programming is extremely simple compared to Android Studio. Still takes time to learn, but less time than Java programming would. Though it's unable to do multiple things that Java can, certain methods won't exist in block programming. As a team, we recommend that you take the longer amount of time and really learn how to use Android Studio and learn to code in Java, because this will help your autonomous and teleop programming be more advanced, which allows for a more reliable robot. Now we're going to get into some words of advice. These are tips that we have for you as a rookie team. We have made lots of mistakes, and here are some tips so that other rookie teams and other teams can simply avoid the mistakes that we have made. So first, um, part of words of advice. At the end of every team meeting, or even at the beginning, whatever works for your team, you want to have a group discussion. This helps integration, collaboration, and make sure everybody's on the same page. So you want everybody to share what they worked on, what progress they made, and that way everybody's up to date. So even if you're not involved in programming, or if you're not involved in building, or you're not involved in outreach, you want to know what's going on around your team. Teams can have up to 10 plus members, so keeping everybody on the same page is very important. Then you want to document all your meetings and put it in the engineering notebook. This shows judges that you guys are um, collaborating and discussing, and documenting the team meeting will serve as a recap of what you did that day. Next relates to outreach. You want to take a lot of pictures during your outreach events. This is very important because they are proof. They show the judges that you're directly interacting with the community. It shows that you are involved, and it just mainly it's proof. Next, create a calendar with time frames in which certain tasks would be complete. This is important because if you have people taking too much time where it's not needed, you're going to fall behind, and you're not going to have time to finish, per se, your programs or building before competition date comes. So by creating a schedule, it really helps keep everybody in a timely manner, and everything will get done. Here are a couple pictures relating to those last words of advice. On the left, you can see a Kanban board. This is what we use to for team organization. So on the from left to right, basically we have systems. So it could be an intake system. Then one task could be an outreach event. Then we basically have in progress. So it's in progress, and then we have completed. So that's when it's finished. It's basically we don't have to worry about it anymore. It's finally finished. And then below in two subsections, it's parts needed. So parts we need to order. And then once they've arrived, so we know that we have the parts. Even if you didn't see the package come in, you can look at this board and say, oh, my motor's arrived. I can finally build the rest of my chassis, something like that. And on the right, you can see team discussions. This is us having our team discussions and collaborating. And these are pictures we include in our engineering notebook to show that to the judges. Next set of words of advice. We recommend setting aside a full week, if possible, before competition to test your programs and mechanical systems. Testing is really important, and our team made a lot of mistakes where we did not leave enough time for testing. So we went to competition day thinking things would work, and they didn't work. So leaving that full week, and in that week, hopefully you guys can meet a couple days before competition and focus on making sure everything's working and that your programs are working. Don't make major changes right before competition. All you should be really doing to the robot building wise is repairs. Next is plan to meet more as competition day gets closer. You're going to need to prepare your judge's presentation. You're going to need to prepare for travel, packing, a lot of things. Um, a lot of tasks come with competition days, so just plan to meet a few extra times that week. Plan competition dates early in the season to help place deadlines. This is important so you can schedule how fast you need to get things done, as well as competitions will fill up quickly. So if you want to go to a certain competition, sign up fast so you have a higher chance of getting a spot in that certain competition. Collaborate with other teams and get advice from professionals. It might be hard to get advice from a professional. Not everybody around you might be a professional programmer or know much about manufacturing, building, and CAD. But other teams definitely do have skills, especially senior teams. Our team has collaborated with other teams like Voltamort. We've collaborated with Xbots, RoboLords. There's a lot of people that we have collaborated with, and it really helped us in terms of comparing designs, getting help. We've helped each other with parts, and in general, it helps other teams and yourself. So really, don't be shy. Don't be afraid to go reach out to other teams for help. Next is a really big one that I really want to emphasize is take advantage of preseason time. In preseason time, you can get outreach done. You can start doing chassis designs. You can start planning, doing a part inventory list, all these kind of things, all these little tasks that you don't really need the specific challenge for. You can get this all done in preseason, and it lets you focus on core parts of FTC during the actual season, like building your robot and programming, because those take a lot of time, and you can't necessarily do them in preseason. Preseason is also great to learn new tasks. So if I was a builder this year, I'm currently learning how to program in preseason just so I have a better understanding for next year. I just mentioned this. Having an organized inventory of parts is super important, so you know where parts are, where they are. So having them organized physically as well as in some sort of database. Our team's implementing that, and it's going to help really keep track of what we have and where it is. Um, Next is make sure to have an organized system for ordering parts. So we really recommend assigning one person on your team and a coach to be on top of ordering parts. Our team had trouble with this. We had basically not communicated well with the coaches that we needed to order a part, and we didn't take initiative, and it slipped through the cracks. And what happened is our parts came late, and we lost a lot of time before competition. So what you really want to do is order these parts as soon as you can. Next part of words of advice is make sure your team buys a playing field and walls. Though if your rookie team is on a certain budget and these are expensive, the playing field and walls are expensive. So if you cannot afford it, then look for scrimmages. So for someone to focus on the playing field and walls, it's really important to have these if you can, because it's great for testing and practicing before competition, as well as for programming a reliable autonomous program using encoder ticks. You really want to have a um, reliable playing field that you don't make changes on, and it's equivalent to what you'll see at the competition. This way, it makes it a lot easier for programmers and testing in general. So if you can't have a playing field, or you just don't have enough space, because it is 12 by 12 feet, it's pretty large, what you want to do is look for scrimmages. So a lot of teams around you, especially senior teams, will be hosting scrimmages um, every season, and you can go to these scrimmages and basically do mock competitions, compete, and this is great. So you can just try out your robot. You really can't lose anything from going to a scrimmage. Again, FTC is a really friendly community, and everybody just wants to help each other. So the scrimmages are there for you to go and improve and get ideas from other teams and just get your practice in. Uh, this one's a little more specific, is using coders on motors, not time-based. So there are two types of programming you can use on um, motors. You can use time-based programs, and you can use encoder values. Encoder values are basically measuring the distance um, you're traveling in motor ticks, whereas time-based is powering the motors for a certain amount of time, and at the end of the time they will stop, but it doesn't actually track the distance you're going. The reason time-based doesn't work well, especially for autonomous, is because if I am saying I want my motors to go forward for 3 seconds, if my battery is half full, contrary to if it was fully full, those motors will actually spin faster. Therefore, the distance changes, and you can't have an accurate autonomous if you're using encoders. Now, if you're using encoders on motors, then you'll be able to see the distance you're traveling rather than having to basically get lucky based on your time. So even if it takes longer to go, let's say 3 feet, you're going to be able to go that 3 feet consistently. Next is try multiple systems for the same task if you have time. You can prototype 2, 3 different intake systems or claw systems or whatever you're trying to build. If you do multiple and you prototype well, this allows you to find out what's works the best for the team. Now, if you're on a time crunch, you really want to stick with one and execute it the best you can. Again, you don't want to be testing out new systems right before a competition. Next is for your team phones, driver station and robot controller. We recommend using Moto G4 Plays. They have really good connectivity, and they'll save you matches at the competition, because if your phones disconnect because they have bad connectivity, you'll end up not being able to control your robot, and you almost lose an entire match depending on how early they lose connection. So going into FTC phones and what they're used for, I'll explain it briefly for those of you who don't know. The driver station is, as you can see, the DS, and that is what your controller is connected to. So you have that in your hand or right next to you while you're in the robot competition. And what it's doing, it's sending signals to the robot controller, the RC, which is on the robot, and that robot controller is receiving signals, the input signals from the driver station, and the phone receives it and sends it to the expansion hub. The expansion hub is the brain of your robot. It's connected to your motors, your sensors, your servos, everything. So that's essential part of your robot. So if you lose the connection between the driver station and robot controller, you won't be able to get signal to your expansion hub. Therefore, your robot won't work. So going back into the Moto G4 Play, that's what we have experience with. We've never had many connection problems with it. They're also really cheap compared to other phones. The Moto G5 and G6 are also good options, but they will cost more. So if you're on a budget as a rookie team, Moto G4 Play is really the way to go. Next is have a secure phone mount where your phone is located, wherever your phone is located on the robot. The reason for this is um, it, we had experiences where our phone was not fully secure and a robot got hit and our phone went flying out of the robot and it got disconnected, like from the cable that connects to the rev expansion hub, and basically we couldn't receive signals from the driver station and our robot was just sitting there in the playing field, and we got lucky that our phone did not get destroyed in the process. um, Luckily it survived, but having a secure phone mount will keep it protected. You won't lose a phone or break a phone, and you'll be able to be active the entire robot competition. Next is make sure the robot has walls and essential components are protected. We mentioned this a little bit before, but I want to recap. um, Protecting your robot is very important. It will save you a lot of time, money, and parts, and a lot of crucial things during competition if your robot is protected. Don't overlook walls, even though they don't seem significant while you're building your robot and testing. Once you go to competition, you will immediately regret not having protection and walls around your robot. This last part of words of advice connects to team meetings. So if your team only meets once a week, because as everybody knows, everybody has busy schedules, sports, school, other activities. So if you can only meet at whatever house you're going to or location for FTC once a week, you want to be doing a Zoom call, Skype, Google Hangouts, whatever you want to use, but you want to be doing an online call additional to that meeting. The reason for this is a lot of FTC work can be done offline. When I say offline, I mean not at the place you guys meet. So a lot of CAD programming, all that can get done at home, and you guys can keep each other up to date on the Zoom call. You can also discuss upcoming outreach events or ideas. You can discuss anything, recruiting. You can discuss everybody's progress they've been making. So you want to have this Zoom call. It only really takes an hour, and you want to document this Zoom call and put it into your engineering notebook, just as you would with any other meeting.
So this is a quick rundown of your typical tournament day. So from 7 to 8 a.m. you will arrive, and from 8 a.m. to until the robot matches start, teams will go to their judges presentation, and from 8 to 9 a.m. you will go to your robot inspection, which is when the judges check that your robot meets the specifications that were set. From 10 to 11 a.m., your matches will start and they will run until 2 p.m., in which you will play 5 matches. At 2 p.m., the top 4 teams will start picking other teams to be in their alliances to compete for a spot in states in which the final matches will occur. At 3 p.m., the award ceremony will happen. So these are just some tips for competition day. So you want to make sure you arrive early, so this way you can get to your setup area and set up either your trifold or get the robot ready before the matches start. And you want to make sure you get your robot inspections done as soon as possible so you can get that out of the way. So beforehand and before the tournament, you want to make sure you have a well thought out judge's presentation in which you cover all the aspects of your team and give reasons why your team deserves recognition. So beforehand, if you're planning to bring food for the team, make sure that you have enough for everyone. Or during the lunch period in the tournament, you want to make sure you order food so it gets there by the time that you need it. So prior to arrival time at the tournament, you want to make sure you assign roles for who is responsible for bringing what, and you want to create a checklist to make sure you have everything before you depart for the tournament. And you always want to make sure you have someone from your team in the pit area in case judges want to interview your team. So these are some more tips for competition day. So you want to make sure you always bring spare parts and extras as things are bound to break in the competition. So if you have an extra, you can just repair it and your robot won't be just inactive for the rest of the day. So you want to make sure you purchase a cart for placing your robot. So you can have easy transportation throughout the halls of the location where the tournament is being held. And you want to make sure you bring eye goggles for everyone on the team because you won't be allowed into the pit area without them. And as always, show kindness and gracious professionalism towards other teams and team members, as that is what FIRST is all about. And always show team spirit and support your team members.
So thank you to everyone who came to view our presentation. We're now going to be answering questions that you guys have put in Slido, and we'll be reading and answering the questions. So, yep.
So the first question is, do I have to know about robotics/programming, electronics and stuff in order to be a part of FIRST?
So having a background in STEM is always going to be beneficial, but the whole point of STEM, in FIRST FTC, but the whole point of FIRST is to get introduced and learn STEM. So if even if you don't have a background, if you're joining a rookie team, you're joining a team, the whole point is to go and to learn how to do these things. So no, you don't need a background, but we still highly encourage you to go learn these things while being part of a FTC team. In my personal experience, I knew nothing about building and I knew little about CAD when I first joined this FTC team. Coming out of it after just simply one season, I had learned so much more in CAD. I had expanded my skills. I had fully learned how to build a robot and I can do it with ease now. So you will learn as you participate in FTC. So don't be discouraged if you don't know much about electronics and robots in general. You will be able to learn.
So the next question is, what if someone on the team doesn't work on anything and is distracted?
If somebody's not working on the team and they're distracted, if there's nothing left for them to do, you might just want to send them home. Or if there is something left and they're just distracted, then you and your teammates should help he or she get back on the track.
The next question is negative camber a good idea in FTC?
So I'm assuming you're talking about wheels for your chassis. Um, so honestly, I have not seen anybody do a negative camber in FTC. The reason for this is with FTC parts, which you'd order from, common manufacturers of parts like GoBuilda, Actobotics, Rev. Um, there isn't really pre-built mechanisms to achieve negative camber, and if they are quite complex, which will lead to more breaking of parts because the more complex you get in your system, the higher chance it's going to break and higher chance problems are going to arise. Though what most teams use now, this is a little specific, so if you don't understand what I'm saying, that's completely fine. There's these things called mechanism wheels. If you search up "go build a mechanism wheels" on Google, you'll be able to see what it looks like. Basically, it's wheels that allow you to basically go forward, turn, go backwards, everything normal, as well as go side to side without turning. So, like if you think of a car, to go left, towards the left, you have to turn and then go forward. With mechanism wheels, you can simply what's called strafing and just go left with facing the same direction. So most people will not use a camber on their a camber, a negative or positive camber. They won't be using it on their wheels, but they will be using it on you most teams will be using mechanism wheels as they really help your mobility across the playing field.
The next question is, when in the year do you guys start recruiting new members?
So we start recruiting from anywhere uh, from the end of the season to the beginning of the season because that's the best time to get a new member involved into FTC because during the season wheels are going to be turning and if somebody new comes in they're not really going to have any role inside the team. So it's best to bring somebody in between the time period of the end of the season and the beginning of the next season.
The next question is, how should I start if I want to learn programming for FTC?
So if you want to learn programming for FTC, it's best if you start by learning basic Java. And to help people out, First has given uh, a software development kit on GitHub, and it comes with a bunch of pre-programmed instructions. And if you know the basics of Java, you should be able to put those to use, and you should be able to create some programs for your robot.
The next question is, why would they not use camber, just slant the motors as well?
As I said, it's definitely possible, but again, most manufacturers won't make many angle pieces exactly how you want it. Again, slanting the motors also creates elevation, so if you're trying to keep under height constraints, that might not help you keep your chassis low to the ground. Along with that, again, having an angle mount would often have to be 3D printed, and 3D printed parts are generally not going to be as strong as steel parts. So if you really want to do a camber on your robot, it is possible. You will be able to do it, but the time you will spend doing it, also the amount of money you'll have to use to get those extra parts, and also just it might break a lot easier than a normal wheel or mechanism wheel would. So again, we do not recommend doing a camber on your wheels, but if it's really something you want to experiment with, go ahead and experiment and create a video on it. There's plenty of teams who would be interested to see it.
And in addition to that, there's really no point in having a camber because the surface of the FTC mat is quite it has quite a bit of friction that the robot will stick onto. And having mechanism wheels is a much better advantage because you can go in any direction.
The next question is, what do I do if I join and don't know much about programming, electronics, mechanics, etc.?
Well, the entire point of FTC is to teach people about programming, electronics, mechanics, and etc. If you don't know much about programming, electronics, mechanics, etc., one good thing you should do is you should go and ask a team member who is specialized in one of those areas and ask them to help you learn. Because if you do, I'm sure most of them will be fine with that, and it should you should be able to learn it. You know, so
The next question is, do you have both the team captain and a club president? If so, how do their roles/jobs differ from each other?
So we don't have an assigned captain. We do assign roles, so certain people have roles for sure. So, for example, I was a builder. Then we had programmers and etc. And then we have people working between multiple roles. But in terms of leadership, Generally, the more senior people, so people who are not new recruits and people who have been doing FTC and just have more knowledge, those are generally the people the new recruits will look up to. So when I was a new recruit, I looked up to um, basically the senior builder because I got into building that year, and they mentored me and went through the entire season mentoring me, and I pretty much now know how to build a robot. So the reason we haven't um, done a team captain or a club president is because we want everybody to feel as they are equal to one another in FTC. Simply because you are a new recruit doesn't mean your opinion is any less than somebody else's. You can still pitch your ideas, your design ideas, and everything. It's not bad to have a team captain. A lot of teams do, and if you guys or if your team wants to do that and assign leadership roles, that is perfectly fine. Our team just simply has not reached that format, though we do kind of have just a kind of natural way of the senior guys being the people who take a little bit more roles. For example, senior people will be doing harder roles such as programming, which is definitely a role that takes more time to learn. They'll also be picking up on other smaller design things. So just in general, if you're a senior person, you'll basically the team will rely on you probably more than the new rookie people, but it really is not that big of a strain to be a senior guy on the team.
The next question is, how do you keep your team on the same page regarding stuff that needs to be done?
So
we created this thing called like the Kanban board, which kind of helps us with that, where we kind of we have like we didn't like a wall, but technically if you take a board and just write up like a bunch of different categories like parts orders, things that are missions for us to be like tasks to be done, tasks that are done. So if there's like a visual presentation of everything that's been done and you kind of bullet everything that we need to do, everything that's been done, and then like people review what's been done to make sure like it's fully finalized. This way the whole team knows what's going on. So that's actually really important to make sure everyone knows what's going on so people don't repeat the same stuff or people don't think that something's already done and move on. That has been a problem before for us. So always make sure that everyone knows what's going on, even if they may not be involved in that task, because something can go wrong and you don't want it to be something that your own team made a mistake of just because of like a repetition mistake. So
Okay, the next question is, do team members have set leadership roles, and how are those roles decided?
Most people, depending on their experience beforehand, they will set either being a builder, a programmer, an outreach, like someone who schedules all of our outreach. But to have a leadership role, you probably need to have more experience in the team just so that the people know that they can count on you. And someone with a leadership role probably will have more commitment that they're going to have to put into the team. If there's something like example, if you're the leader of the outreach, you're probably going to be the person who reviews all of the outreach that someone does, or the person who organizes it or finalizes it. So the leadership role is probably more commitment, and you probably have to have more experience in the team to get that role. So don't like think of that as your first role if you're going to be like a rookie member. But if you want to work up to having a leadership role in the team, then definitely work hard at what you're trying to do and find the spot in the team that you want to have. It's kind of hard to have a leadership role when you're switching teams or switching roles throughout the season. So yeah.
The next question is a middle school FTC team worth it?
I would say if you can have any exposure to FTC, if that's it really doesn't matter how you're getting into FTC. One thing I really want to share from what I personally gained from FTC is when you go into FTC gives you a lot of life skills in terms of it really opens up what you might want to do as a career in terms of if you find outreach, building, programming, all of these kind of categories pretty interesting to you. It really can help you learn about these things and get you introduced to them. Even though as an FTC team, you want to win in competitions, of course, you want to strive to be the best FTC team you can. But in the same time, if your FTC team is not necessarily the best FTC team, or if it's a rookie team and you want to go straight to a team that wins FTC team championships or whatever, really what you need to be focused on is getting the learning and experience from FTC, because once you realize that there's a greater value than winning FTC competitions, it's really about the learning that you get from FTC teams, and it's really a fun way to learn because you get to do things. It's not like school where you're sitting in a classroom 7 hours. It really is a fun experience to learn. And yes, you do want to so yes, I would say yes, an FTC team, middle school or not, is worth it, because just having those FTC, the skills you get from FTC really just help you out in life. You learn a lot of things, even presentation skills you learn from design and judges presentation. So yeah.
The next question is Algebra 1 enough math knowledge for FTC/Mechanum wheels?
I wouldn't really classify the knowledge of Mechanum wheels into Algebra 1 geometry, pre-calculus. What Mechanum wheels are is basically they are a counteractions of force causing the robot to move in different directions depending on where the force is applied. The details are in geometry, and if you want to know about like the workings of mechanism wheels, then I would say Algebra 1 isn't enough. But if you want to know how to use them and if you want to put them on your robot, then yeah, sure, Algebra 1 is enough.
So the next question is, how do you get picked with the good alliance?
That's a really good question. So at the competition, the 5 matches that you compete in with an alliance, they're like randomly picked by the competition organizers. So basically, you'll just get a list of the 30 or 40 qualification matches, and your team will participate in 5 with another like with the team you're allied with that they are picking. So it's totally random. It's not like they choose like better teams with better teams and stuff like that, or more experienced teams. But after you compete in the 5 matches that are already set, depending on how good you were and how high your ranking is, which depends on how well you did in the match, how well your alliance did in the match, um, the 4 top teams are like the captain teams, and they will choose other teams to be their alliance for the final matches. So there's a semifinal, a final match, and those 2 matches, like, you get awards based on how far you get in those matches as well. So those are really important. So for getting picked with a good alliance, that's the only time you can get picked. And to be picked with a good alliance, or to be picked at all, which is like a really good thing, they have a first pick and a second pick. So technically you have 8 chances because there's 4 teams and 2 picks per team. But in order to get picked with a good alliance, you should scout other teams. So basically, if you tell the other team who you are, what you've done, how your matches have gone, even though you're not in the top 4, that you're still a really good team, or your team is really strong, your robot is really strong in one specific part of the game field, or they're really good at this one task that the other team may be lacking, you want to really like let the top 4 teams know what your team can do, so that they want to pick your team. And we have gotten far enough from just being a second pick team that actually allowed us to get to states. So it's really important to have a good impression on other teams. And it's called scouting, which is basically you telling the other teams what your robot can do and them telling you what their robot can do. So if you're the top 4, then you know who to pick as well.
The next question is, how many people are a good team size?
We recommend having about 8 team members. As you can see from our presentation, there are a lot of roles to fulfill in FTC, major and minor roles. So not just necessarily building, programming, and all that stuff. There's a lot more to it. There's smaller roles that involve a lot of organization. So if you don't have 8 members, it's not the end of the world. It's possible to have a FTC team, but just having 8 members makes it so you're less reliant on one person. So if one person goes on vacation and is not is not like super busy or something, or is too busy to show up for a week, basically you'll have somebody else to fill in. And if you're running low on members, just we would recommend that you guys go out and recruit new people, as there are a lot of people looking to join FTC. Good question.
The next one is, should I use Java in my first year? I'm not very experienced with Java, but I think it might be good.
Yes, I do think you should use Java in your first year. Right now it's preseason, and the challenge will come out at basically the beginning of this next school year. So really, you have a lot of time to learn Java for FTC, and I think it's definitely enough time to get to familiar with it, so that you're good enough to start programming for an FTC team. You won't be nobody programming knows everything unless you're super advanced, but it's really just being able to understand so that you can incorporate things that you need to search up or things you need to learn quickly. But yeah, I think you would be able to use Java in your first year. I honestly think that Java and Android Studio is the right approach, because it just gives you a lot more advantages in FTC rather than using blocks programming.
The next one is 10 to 15K a good FTC budget for a year?
10 to 15K is a lot of money for FTC. Yeah, I think it's a good budget, but you won't really need that much unless you're considering buying like power tools, like a bandsaw, um, like a stand drill, and you want to buy like a bunch of power tools. Then 10 to 15K would be a good FTC budget, but usually for us, we only need around like $4,000 to $5,000. So.
The next question is, are middle schoolers too young to join FTC?
So the FTC age range is anywhere from 7th grade to 12th grade. So if you're a middle schooler above the 7th grade, yeah, then you're not too young to join FTC. It's completely fine.
The next question is, Macadam wheels or Omni wheels?
Macadam wheels definitely. Omni wheels don't really get you anywhere, and they won't let you drive straight.
One thing to add quickly is, if you don't have Macadam wheels, do cost around anywhere between $300 to $500. If you are on a tight budget with your team, you sure can use Omni wheels. It'll save you quite a bit of money. But if you have the funds, definitely go for Macadam wheels.
The next question is, are angle grinders required?
I don't see why you need an angle grinder unless you wanted to like shave something. So I don't really think they're required, but if you want to use it, go ahead.
The next question is, should I use metal to build my frame, or PVC or wood?
I'm assuming you're talking about the walls for around your robot. We actually had experience with polycarbonate, which was pretty strong and flexible, that we used. But there are definitely a lot of different teams that use different kinds of materials, and it's really up to the experiencing. Oh no, yeah, but basically, what you want to remember is you want the walls to be thin. Here it says know the frame. If you're talking about like the chassis and the actual structure, that you want to be using metal from, and you want to be using a provider of these metal parts. So for example, if you go to the Go Build a website, or you search up Actobotics or Tektrix or Rev, you'll see that they have an inventory of parts that are all compatible with each other. You want to be using like that set.
You can use literally any material to build your frame, as long as it's sturdy enough to hold the weight and it can maintain lots of force.
The next question is the Strafer kit Go Builda overpriced?
It's not if you use it properly.
You still have time. You ask the 7K.
One thing about the strafer kit is it is on like the max dimensions. So if you need like certain parts of your robot to be protruding from the chassis, it might not be the best option, but it's definitely a good starting spot. It's definitely a good chassis. It does use bevel gears though, so you have to consider that your motor RPM is being cut in half, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're using high enough RPM motors.
Will this have to be our last question?
Yeah, I think the last question. This would be our last question after this question. That would be our last question. So if you have an FLL team, would you recommend sixth, seventh grade kids staying with FLL for a couple of years until they move to FTC? If you're in sixth and seventh grade, and if you're going to seventh grade, it's fine if you're like younger than by a year. You can go to FTC if you want to. If you don't, you can stick with FLL. It's all based on your preference. But if I were to recommend, it's best to start FTC younger because as you grow older and go to high school, you won't have as much time to focus.
The next question is, what is the most preferred kit?
It's up to your
Go ahead.
the most preferred kit. It's up to your preferences. There's three main manufacturers of parts for FTC, and that's the websites are servocity.com, gobuilda.com, andymark.com, and Tetrix. So if you so each one has their own benefits and disadvantages, but I'd suggest like my favorite kit that I prefer using is GoBuilda because it's easy to use and it's motion based. So you can build moving mechanisms pretty easily.
I also want to quickly add, if you're talking about kits and like within the manufacturers, they sell like bundles. Our team avoided bundles because bundles include like a lot of unnecessary parts that you never use. So ordering specific parts, specific on what your CAD designs call for, or simply what you have in mind. But if you're thinking of like an FTC starter kit, it's not necessarily a bad thing to purchase. But if you're on a budget and you need specific parts, you might want to avoid them.
Yeah.
So I think this will have to be our last question, and it is a 20-to-1 gear ratio good for driving motors?
Depends on how fast your motor is, because FTC sells different motors, different speeds of motors. So
All right, and real quick in chat, there's a form for people to feedback forum. If you want to complete that, that would be highly appreciated. Thank you to everybody who came and attended. I hope everybody was able to get something and learn something from this FTC tutorial.
thank you.